at the Roxbury studio of BNN TV, Boston, Massachusetts, here to give you another show of Toward Equality of Life, a live show, a call-in show. So I hope you get those dialing fingers ready to call into the show and give us your comments, your questions, talk about anything that you may have on your mind. We talk about many of the events of the day, general questions people have deep inside of them, political, religious, philosophical, and also about our psychology. So if you have some ideas or thoughts about personal questions that you're interested in about your own psychology, your own situation, or in general, call in. So it's a wide gamut. And of course, while I'm waiting for your calls, I will be talking as well, keeping this airspace full with something to say. But please dial in and call us by all means. And you'll be seeing the telephone number from time to time on the screen. So please take advantage of that. We'd love to hear from you. And you don't have to be scared to call. You don't have to worry about, how or what you're saying. Just call. We'll be nice. We try to be nice. In fact, that's one of our propaganda messages, that between people there should be a civil discourse, if at all possible, rather than go to war, rather than shoot at each other or hit each other, that we should strenuously try and cultivate the ability to talk things through. Get hot under the collar, perhaps, and argue and debate, but talk things through and work things out with this supposed intelligent mind that we have as human beings. So, for my first, we're here too, I usually tell the month that we're in. We're here in the month of March in 2006, the year 2006, and the years are flying by. And we've had a rather mild winter, generally speaking, although we have had some periods of plummeting temperatures, and they've come rather late when we usually would get the plummets. We got warm air, and now a little belated, we've had some cold air, and a little bit before now as well. So we'll see what the future brings. But you know that we speak a lot about environment here, and if you've been paying attention recently, there have been extremely warm temperatures in areas of the country that would never be experiencing such warm temperatures this time of year. Places like South Dakota and Minnesota and the Heartland. Right now, I believe, I saw on the map, though I don't follow it that closely, there are like 60s going on, maybe even higher in some areas that should be in early March winter weather. So if you're following and just keeping your eyes and ears open, you know that there's a lot going on that's irregular and wrong and continues to go on, not just freak events, but the freak events keep on occurring with more and more frequency and more intensity. So please stay aware of the environment, which is such a wonderful thing. You've got to take care. Speaking of the environment, it comes to my mind how easily we use up things that are really precious that someday we'll come to know, and we use them with abandon. For example, the way we use plastic bags that are not biodegradable, and even if they were, why should we be filling our landfills with as many plastic bags as go out to everybody every day? Every little thing we buy gets a plastic bag and a double bag and a little bag for the little stuff into the big bag for the big stuff. And what do we do with those plastic bags? They just get thrown away, and they're choking the environment, and the manufacture of plastic is bad for the environment in and of itself. And if you go to any recycling center, any dump area, you'll see huge tracts of land devoted to burying this trash. Why we use stuff with such abandon, we just don't know any better. It's going to come to pass that these things will be prohibited, that resources will become precious, and the pollution will be so great. Or, for example, the way we use paper towels. Of course, I'm guilty too. I use plastic bags, guilty. I go along with what's going on. Maybe I could do better, and I should try to, probably have to cart my bags around, my own personal bags, to reuse them. But I do reuse every plastic bag. They're precious to me. Like if you go to TJ Maxx, for example, they have huge bins of plastic bags that they just dispose of and don't recycle. Everything gets a plastic bag, a big plastic bag, and there it goes into the garbage bin. So I do reuse every plastic bag, and that would be a good policy for you as well to think about, to try to reuse at least every plastic bag for some, rather than throw away the ones you get in the grocery store and then pull out some that you've bought at a very high price, I might add, some garbage bags, again, to do your garbage in. No, use the bags you get and tie them up. At least that would be some use of them. The other thing, speaking of environment, that came to my mind just now too is watching people use paper towels, which ultimately come from trees, and trees are so precious. Trees are what we need. And we will just cavalierly pull at paper towels and use like 3 and 4 of them just to wipe something or to wipe our hands or to do, and paper is being wasted and wasted all over the place, and it's getting more and more expensive. But worse than that, Mother Nature needs the trees to breathe, and we cannot just be using stuff up with such abandon and such sort of piggy ways that we don't even realize. To say the least of the ways we use our food, dumping so much food into the trash when people are hungry all over the world. So we have some ways of being sort of gluttonous and slovenly, and not even realizing that, hey, there's a price to all of this, including the real cost in dollars and cents to you when you try to purchase these things, or they're figured into the products that you're buying, generally speaking. So look at all the packaging, all the styrofoam, which is so deadly and so bad for the environment. Look at all the packing, the foam, the cardboard boxes that get thrown. Look at the overnight letters. Look at all the packing going into this. Just throw it away, the plastic on that. So we got to think about this. Think about our environment. I saw that in Iran, which is under the gun now for having nuclear facilities and perhaps secretly working on the ability to have a nuclear bomb, of course, is very much under the gun. And apparently, Iran had invited the agency that oversees what countries do with nuclear manufacturing. And somehow it was found at one of the sites that the soil was contaminated with some radioactive material, and that some trees were contaminated with it. So the mayor, I think, of Tehran, or someone to that effect, ordered that in that area, in order to not have the agency be able to detect that they had radioactive materials going on in that area, ordered that 7,000 trees be cut down. So 7,000 trees were cut down recently, and I don't know the name of the place at which it was done in Iran. And what a sad thing that is to think of, because of trying to hide something or in an impulsive, rash, fell swoop moment, to just kill and destroy 7,000 trees. And according to the report I heard on the news, the people who are environmentally responsible in Iran were complaining and upset. And of course, anybody can recognize in any country, not just a country so using the environment as the United States, so using it up to abandon, people all over the world recognizing how valuable nature is, how valuable trees are, how valuable good air is, and how all this stuff is not for free. All these products we have that come from our resources that we use with abandon, and how much we need trees, how much we need good air, how much we need clean water. And of course, you see all the articles that are talking about how the ice caps are melting, how the glaciers are melting, how this is going to raise the sea level, how this is going to cause flooding, how Generally speaking, temperatures are warmer, which is something I pointed out a few minutes ago. Even now, at this very moment, we see the warmer than usual temperatures, and how many kinds of catastrophes these overwarmings and overdone situations are going to cause to befall us on this planet. So be aware, look and listen, and it's not all just so easy as the video games or the cartoons or MTV or the Oscars would have you believe. And it's not all about dress up and be rich as the television would have you believe. The environment and rationale, the environment, the idea to keep an environment as healthy as possible and to preserve it and to love the nature that's in it and to do everything for the nature to continue to exist as it does, what little is left, what little is not irrevocably damaged, is a theme of this show all the time, as is the theme of this show to do something to proselytize that just going to war and bombing people, killing people, slapping people, hurting people is not the answer, is not the way for us to live. And it's an old tradition that has gone way beyond its utility. And it's time to start proselytizing and bringing out more representation of a negotiated way of life rather than an aggressive bombing, killing, hurting. I heard a wife of some relative of a military person talk about a foundation she had for veterans and good work she was doing helping them. And she prefaced her remarks about what she does saying that, you know, I guess there'll always be situations where people will be hurting and killing each other and making for, you know, disasters, so to speak, in each other's lives. And then she went on to tell what she was all about. And my thought about that is, we've got to stop thinking that war is inevitable, grow up, war is the only way, fear is the only way, hate your neighbor, hate your enemy. We've got to start thinking we've got to move another way. We've got to speak another way. We've got to think another way. We have to, remember Jesus Christ said to love your enemy, if you can believe that. I'm not saying that I'm anywhere near that position, but if you're Christian, remember that the moral of the story is to love your enemy if you can ever reach a plane like that. In fact, if you are Buddhist and you're thinking of entering or getting to the plane of nirvana, you can also be of the mindset, your goal of the mindset is to go towards having no enemies, being above dissension, being beyond dissension. But so we have to proselytize and give the idea and give the direction. We can work things out. We can work things out. We can turn blue in the face. We can strenuously move ourselves towards thinking that what can we do to avoid war at all costs? What can we do to avoid hurting people at all costs? What other way can we go about this? And surely we can easily agree that we have hardly, as human beings, exhausted all our means possible to be able to figure out, strategize, logisticize within ourselves how to get at a problem with our human mind rather than with our human body. How to get a communication and a reciprocity that will make for progression and betterment of situations between people at all costs to avoid war. So that's another thing that we always want to bring up and remind people about, the environment, and that we do not have to go to war, and war is not the answer. Marvin Gaye, war is not the answer. Okay? You can remember the Marvin Gaye song and all that he said in that song. Now, the other thing that we always want to bring up and keep people aware of is the animals. And I know many of you, in fact, the vast majority of people in this country and maybe around the world, I don't know about every country, but a lot of countries love animals and certainly don't want to see harm come to them, which is why we always bring up a reminder, let's get the animals out of the laboratory. We don't want to be using animals as things to experiment on and exploit and have them suffer these horrific conditions of existence, total pained and tortured conditions of existence, because they're born four-legged or fish or reptiles, whatever they're born as. They get caught, they get advantaged, they get taken advantage of by humans that have more wherewithal to do this to them, and they end up being at the mercy of a very tortured existence in a cage, in a lab, in an experiment. And what a horribly cruel condition to go through this life as. So let's always remember animals. And recently I was in a town where a new store has started that sells reptiles. And I couldn't help but go in there and suggest to the person that it's immoral to keep reptiles in that condition because they're not like dogs or cats that would want to be in your home, although some people who own reptiles may beg to differ. But I'm telling you that those snakes and those lizards captured, it's very sad, would in an instant furtively dart away on the desert sand under a rock into the heat of the sand, then be in those conditions of being in those cages, often in filthy conditions too, in the unnatural setting, because it's very hard to keep things clean, and you can smell the smells if sometimes when you go into these stores and they're in a 2x4 glass thing, they don't know who's going to take them. And I remember someone once had an Australian crocodile. I can't remember what they're called. They're not crocodiles. A small critter that's very common in Australia. He had him in a box as big as his body, and that's where that poor sucker spent his most gruesome existence. So let's remember the animals. Let's remember the conditions that they're being kept in, both as pets sometimes, so to speak. Everything, just like the paper towels and the plastic bags and the gasoline and the bling bling and everything else. Everything in this life, including reptiles and other animals, are not just for our disposal. That's a big human lesson to be learned. Everything that's here is not just for us to use it and abuse it. Use it up for our own privilege, use it up for our own slovenliness, use it up for our own curiosity, use it up for cures for cancer, of which there is so very much. You won't get your cures for cancer there. You'd get, even if you would, it's immoral, and it ain't going to happen that way anyway. But you'd get much closer to your cures for cancer if you were worried about how much plastic is in the world and how much plastic surrounds our meats and the saran wrap and the styrofoam. If you were worried about drinking from the plastic in the cups and the plastic in the milk, if you were worried about that, you might get a little closer to the cancer problem. So the animals, and you know what? Someone suggested, I don't know if this is true, you might have heard of this. I'm not necessarily opposed to hunting personally. Of course, it's not for me to say what's to be opposed to or not. But, you know, if someone wants to go and shoot a deer and eat the meat, I try my best to stay away from meat. It's very hard to do. I try like hell to stay away from meat on an ethical basis. No other basis, because meat is probably good for you, not the meat we get that's so poisoned and antibioticized and hormonalized by the time we're eating it, reddened. And what else did I hear? Oh yeah, now they're going to put meat through carbon monoxide. They're going to put a little carbon monoxide gas on meat because it preserves the redness for a long, long time. So they got the okay from the FDA to give a little carbon monoxide gas to the meat so that it'll be preserved with the redness. So be aware of all these things that you're eating. I just kind of, by going off on that meat tangent, I just kind of lost my train of thought. But, oh dear. Oh yes, So I was talking about hunting. Yes, if you wanted to go and hunt a deer and then, eat it, use up every part of that, go fishing, eat it, use it up. I'm not necessarily against that too terribly much if that's how you're really surviving. And if the animal has a chance, the problem is the animals don't have a chance today to be free. They're just targets waiting to get killed because there's no land for them to roam. There's no space for them to be free. So it's not really a wild situation. But worse than that, all across the United States are places where there are perimeters that are fenced in, that are perimeters for animals to be in, to be hunted. They're farms for hunting where you go and pay a fee and someone drives you around and the animals are captive and you can go and hunt them. How cruel a thing. And I heard, which I'm not sure, I heard that when Dick Cheney went and did his famous quail hunting, that those quail were captive on one of these kinds of hunting farms and that wings are clipped of these animals so that they're much easier targets and I guess also can't fly away from the hunting farm. And I'd like to have someone check that out further and find out if that's the case. But isn't that kind of sad? I mean, hunting because you need the meat and you need something to eat and you're really in a wild, free roaming situation. I can see a case to be made for that. But hunting in a captive situation where the animals have no recourse but to get shot and you're just doing it like people used to do it in a safari just for the thrill of hunting, the thrill of the shoot, the thrill to see the animal go down. And I was reading recently, too, that now it's been allowed in Yellowstone suddenly for the bison that they had reintroduced there to be killed. And someone was portraying how a bison was being shot and had taken many, many shots over a long period of time and died an agonizing death. For what? The meat wasn't used, just for the thrill of the kill, the thrill of the kill, the thrill of hunting, the thrill that you shot an animal between the eyes, the thrill of hitting something live. Isn't that cruel to hunt just for the thrill of hunting? Some of you may be familiar with Ted Nugent, the former rock star, who's an avid hunter and speaks in favor of it all the time. But I believe he said that he eats everything that he kills. Some of you might be familiar with him. He just came to my mind as a famous hunter or an infamous hunter. Yeah, some questions. And now I have to tell you a joke. I like this joke very much. You'll see the direction that it's headed in when I tell you. I was watching David Letterman, and I sometimes catch his monologue if I've come to the end of my day, and for a moment I flick on and catch his monologue. And he had one the other night when George Bush was in India, made a trip to India, signed a deal with India on a nuclear manufacturing assistance from the United States. And by the way, we spoke of Iran before. For those of you that do know or don't know, they're building their nuclear capacity. India has already built its nuclear capacity and does have bombs, as does Pakistan. Oh, we have a call. Should I wait for my joke? Yeah, I think this, because it's a really good joke. I have to tell it. Go ahead.
But anyway, I wanted to ask you about, you were talking, I'm sorry to break up your joke. I want to hear that too. But I was listening about your talking about people killing for just the fact of being able to shoot someone directly, shoot an animal directly in the eyes. It made me think of the news reports today about Moussaoui, who was the only person in Al-Qaeda that they say is part of Al-Qaeda, who has been determined to be the only person that they found alive that did not die in the plane crashes that hit the Twin Towers and the World Trade Center. And he has definitely been found guilty. In fact, he pleaded guilty. And there's a question as to whether or not the jury they're selecting now not the jury that they found now, will find him guilty enough to do life, or whether or not he will have to take the death penalty. And I want to know what your opinion was on that, about the death penalty.
Right. And are you asking me about my
in general, but also as it pertains to Moussaoui and the fact that he was the only person that they could find connected with Al-Qaeda, even though he said he wasn't involved in 9/11.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not too familiar with the Moussaoui case, and for some reason, I don't know why, what little I see on the periphery, I tend to feel I suspect he may not be as guilty as they say. I could be wrong, or as guilty of what particularly they're trying to hit him with. I'm not familiar enough with it, so I did want to preface it with that. Somehow I have a feeling this thing has gone on for so long, and there have been so many delays and interruptions and problems with bringing the case that I wonder about it. I really wonder about the case. But be that as it may, if he were found guilty and truly were guilty, should he go to his death, be put to death because of it? And I would be against the death penalty in all circumstances. In fact, from a practical point of view, if you were to put him to death, and he is a functionary in the Al-Qaeda movement, this would probably, from a practical point of view, bring about more animosity, more retribution, more insensitivity and suffering in the short run and the long run. So there's that practical point of view, which is not why I'm taking this position. I just from an absolute point of view, I don't believe personally that life is ours to take. I'm not a person that believes in God, per se. Metaphor, taking somebody's life is in the hands of someone, something way beyond any human being, certainly way beyond myself. So I don't think, even though we have to make judgments about people, and we do go to court and we end up having judgments, and we do have to remove people that are a danger to society, we absolutely have to remove them, and we hardly keep them out of prison or sequestered when they are dangerous. We hardly keep them long enough. Many times people do acts that are so wrong and so irrational, shall we say, or so anti-people, so contrary to the life and welfare of people, that we must keep them away from society in general, because their one act is enough to tell us that they cannot participate for a lifetime. They are just too dangerous to the human cause. So if someone is participating and knowing that people are going to get killed out of the blue, so to speak, they are guilty of a crime against humanity, so to speak. And they have to be sequestered. But it's not ours to take the life of people. And also, on the gory aspect of it, we don't want to just be doing eye for eye and tooth for tooth. You killed me, so I kill you. That's very base. That's very barbaric. And it goes back to what the death penalty opponents bring out all the time, that you become as base as the person who did the inhumane act to begin with. In other words, what's the difference of them killing you or you killing them because they killed you? Isn't it, and people will say, yeah, but they did it first. Yeah, but they did the wrong deed. Your deed is just as wrong, to go and take the life of another human being. Your deed is just as wrong as that. Now, back to the idea of self-defense, too. If people do take someone's life in self-defense or hurt someone because they're really up against the wall, and at that moment they suffer to be extinguished unless they act, that's a whole other story. But a premeditated or an act done merely to hurt people on purpose, not in any such critical circumstance, requires that people be kept away from society, but certainly not put to death. I would definitely be against the death penalty. And of course, from a practical point of view, we also know that so many people have been discovered to be on death row, and you know that's going to happen, who are not guilty, that this happens. They're busted for rape, they're busted for murder, and we find out later that that they really didn't do it through some evidence that's absolutely compelling. The philosophical point here is that if even one innocent person goes to jail, let alone goes to death, but serves life in prison or serves a lot of years in prison, or is potentially going to be put to death or put to death and is innocent, that's as good as if the whole human race served a lot of time in prison and is going to be put to death or suffers to be incarcerated for the rest of their life. One is as good as billions, if you can understand that proposition. So, and I'm reminded in this Moussaoui case of Oklahoma bombing, which was, continues to repercuss. All these acts we do against each other, war, violence, all that, it repercusses. It continues to cause misery. It hands misery to the next generation, and it perpetrates more misery and more anger, more aggression, more suffering. But in the Oklahoma bombing situation, the person, Terry Nichols, who was in jail, and I think either got a light sentence or even stood to be off or was out for a while, recently got put back into jail somehow on the basis of his having known about the bombs being made and the plan of the McVeigh fellow who did it. Okay, we've got a call coming in, and he is now back for similar to if Moussaoui is guilty of knowing of something, even though he wasn't an actor per se. Hello, caller.
Hi, how you doing, Nancy?
All right.
Good. I was watching your show, and I really like your stance on the protection of animals and how hunting is very cruel. I was just wondering, how do you feel about like tribal hunters who hunt for a living, hunt for their tribal needs? How do you feel about that type of hunting?
Well, like I said when I was speaking before, that if you're, I really don't have a big gripe with that, personally speaking. I don't know where people still do that. I guess they do it in South America. They do it in some parts of Africa. They do it in East Asia. Yeah, so I guess the only problem I would have with it is when they're hunted for trophies, when they're hunted for selling them, when they're hunted to go to laboratories. But if they're hunted for survival, I guess I really don't have a problem with that. What do you think, caller?
Well, I just know that sometimes, I'm sorry, I'm out of breath, I had to pick myself up. Sometimes there are people who actually use, their hunting skills for self-sustenance. And, sorry, hold on, give me one moment. Whew. Okay, I have to run downstairs. But, there's other instances where I see these guys go out with rifles and they're actually killing for sport. And like you said, like Ted Nugent said, he eats everything that he hunts. And so if you didn't get to on Ted Nugent, you didn't comment on whether you were for or against him. I guess I didn't get the point. Because he eats what he hunts, so you. I'm
against Ted Nugent. No offense, Ted Nugent. I don't want him angry at me. He's a very angry guy.
Right.
Well, I shouldn't say, but he's not. No, I think he goes overboard with how he's.
He promotes it.
He promotes
it. Right.
He promotes it. He has no use, as far as I can tell, what little I've seen of him, for the animal agenda. Oh, animals, you know, not that he's an anti-environmentalist, but if he were, he would call us tree huggers, for example. You know, oh, those tree hugger nuts, you know. So as an animal, oh, those animal people, you know, those fools that think you have to protect animals. Right. That's the attitude and philosophy I hear from him. You know, and like his music, they're out there to be killed, you know. That's how he is on stage, you know.
He puts the energy towards it like it's actually fun to do it.
Fun, good, proper, and his message is you don't have to feel for animals. Definitely. Get that that's crap.
Right, and he also mounts a lot of his animals on the walls, which makes it like it's a trophy to kill. So,
exactly.
I mean, that right there, the whole actually glamorizing, you know, putting an animal up for display like it's a trophy, and even if you did eat it, I mean, it just still makes it like it seem like you're attaining some type of wealth by taking animals.
Power,
like you're powerful by actually taking a rifle like a coward and hiding behind bushes and killing the animal. You know, it just really makes me feel. I would have more respect for a hunter who took a spear or even a bow and arrow and used skill and used, you know, his stamina, strength, and hunted down an animal and you know, for to eat it, not even just to slaughter it and leave it as a trophy. But I can't really respect a guy who hides behind bushes from 200 yards away and fires a rifle. I mean, it's really senseless, and I like your stance on it, and I appreciate you actually standing up for animal rights. It's very...
Thank you. I don't stand up enough. You know what? You bring me to a point. Thank you very much, caller. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You bring me to a point that I was thinking of mentioning. There are so many things I think of mentioning as I come here. Someone, Taylor Branch, I believe is the name, something to that effect, wrote a book about the Martin Luther King years. And he was being interviewed on 96.9. I was listening to as I came here. And he was explaining how Martin Luther King faced threats every day of his life, real threats, not jokes, real threats every day, more than one, all the time. And he was explaining how when people went to a town, I don't know which town, somewhere probably in the South, I would think, to get people to register to vote who had never registered to vote before during this Martin Luther King era. They were put in jail immediately, and when they came out of jail, they were shot in cold blood as they walked out of jail. And some of the people were white people too, which is always good to mention, to remember that not everybody goes along with what has happened in this country, or went along with it, shall we say. And shot in cold blood. And then how Martin Luther King himself lived with really serious threats and knew that his life would be taken. Probably knew deep inside, how long can you escape getting killed? And so, since he knew that people were out to kill him and that he would be killed, how he did this knowing he would die. Knowing he would die. And the person who wrote the book was asked, did Martin Luther King ever feel fear, as far as you know? And he said, nothing detectable. He did not feel fear. One time only that he knew him, someone who was very close, I guess, was with him much of the time. One time only did he change his speaking engagement and stay in his hotel room because the specifics of the threat were exact, of the place where he'd be and the time and so on. But he did all of this knowing he would die. And that's reminiscent of what Jesus Christ did, not to say that Martin Luther King is Jesus Christ or vice versa and so on. But putting one's belief on the line such that you've got to be willing to die for what you believe in. Believing in it so much that you're willing to die for what you believe in. And that brings me back to what the caller said, thanking me for my animal position. Well, I don't see myself giving up my career, whatever it is, my material possessions, whatever they are. I don't see myself doing that for animals. I don't see myself going the distance for animals. Sure, I talk about it. Sure, I feel the pain. Sure, it makes me suffer. But the animals suffer way more. And I don't see me going out there in a much more public way. You know, so I have limits. I'm not really putting my life on the line. Some animal people put their life on the line. Some environmental people put their life on the line. There was a guy back in California in the 60s, was it, or 70s? I think he was post-military as well. I can't remember his name. A train was coming through carrying radioactive cargo, and he wanted to stop that. They were protesting. They don't want these hazardous materials coming into wherever it was. This is a true story. The guy sat down on the railroad tracks to make the train stop, and the train ran over his legs, okay? Because he wanted to do what was right for the environment. There was a guy who sat up in one of those redwoods in California, the old growth forest, that did not want to see Mother Nature come down. Sat up in the tree and one day fell to his death from the tree, staying up there many days, protecting the tree. Can you understand when somebody loves a tree, when somebody loves an elephant, when somebody loves a lion, when somebody loves an ape? Can you understand how people bleed? And those are the true heroes. The people that believe in something so absolutely that they put their life on the line for it, as did Martin Luther King. I have other pictures of Martin Luther King as well that I won't, facets that I won't talk about right now, but talking about believing in what you're doing and feeling so compelled about it that you have to go the distance with it. Recently, there was a conference put together by Tavis Smiley that aired on C-SPAN, and what that was a conference of many persons from the African American black community. I know there's issues about how people want to refer to themselves, and so forth and so on, and many luminaries from the community and also non-luminaries were there, talking about what the needs are of the black community going forward and so on. And Tavis Smiley brought up a few times, okay, we have another call. He brought up a few times that you have to be willing to die for what you believe. He was bringing this up at the conference. Hello, caller.
Hi, I called a little while ago. I'm sorry. I don't mean to use all your phone calls up on me, but I was number one, I was curious about your joke that you were going to say. I was sitting here waiting for it, and
I'm not leaving the show without saying my joke.
Okay, all right. And now you're getting into the actual civil rights, how people make I guess they take a sacrifice to actually protect other rights of things they believe in, and you talk about the guy on the train tracks and things like that. My question to you is, do you see that type of dedication to a cause happening now? I haven't heard any stories recently where someone's actually put their life on the line for you said that was back in the 60s. Do you see that now in the paper? I never read about someone actually going that length to dedicate themselves to a cause to that extent or whatever. Are you familiar with anything that's going on to that extent right now?
Well, I do know environmentalists do it. The people who are in Greenpeace, I'm sure many of them have died when they've tried to go out on the ocean in their boats and they try to stop whalers and things like that. Yes. Oh yeah, many of them have died. Or they put up their whole life. Many environmentalists and animal people. You can't imagine what kind of animal people are out there. There are people that have taken whatever money they had, quit their jobs, quit their professional careers, and established sanctuaries for animals to come from the laboratory to have a little bit of life after they're going to be lethally injected because they've been used up for experiments, or people that take in animals from Africa that have no place to go and make their whole life dedicated to this and live on a shoestring. I know of a family, I think in Bolton, Massachusetts, that takes in stray pets. The whole family lives for this, and they have very little money. And they do it because they see the animals suffering, and they understand the need. They see the suffering, they see what they've got to do. Simple equation. They don't think, oh, I've got to pay the mortgage, oh, I've got to have a profession. They see the suffering, they see what needs to be done. It's all around us. It's all around us.
I just noticed I haven't seen it as much, lately. As far as the stories that I usually see are old clippings, so I was just wondering what is the momentum behind activism? Is it dying down, or is something going on? But if you say you still see instances, and I guess that's good that that's still maintained.
Well, I'm talking about people that are really going the distance.
Right.
As far as there being people organized, shouting out loud, and being very public about their opposition to something, that has been squelched, generally speaking, especially politically speaking. That has been hushed. And people are more in fear to do so, generally speaking. That doesn't mean you don't have your outspoken people still, but it's not as liberally free in the environment and the atmosphere we live in to speak out. And I'll use this opportunity to take a few swipes at people who at people in power and how they're enlarging this atmosphere, how they're expanding it to be more pervasive so that you won't speak and you won't be opposed, because you're just supposed to trust what they do. Trust without worrying about whether it's true or what the evidence is. You're just supposed to trust and pretty much keep your mouth shut, even while we're fighting for freedom. We're fighting for freedom. We want to be free, but don't criticize. Don't say anything opposed to me. What comes to mind is some people who have been arrested for wearing opposition T-shirts in functions where people in power are speaking, for asking the wrong questions. They have been taken out, arrested, and put in jail.
I'm sure with this Cheney incident, the way he accidentally shot his friend, I guess this is going to bring a lot of attention to the dangers of hunting and how silly it is for grown men to go out and actually, put their lives in danger and also just commit cruel acts. So maybe the next time Cheney goes up to have a speech, there'll be a protester there who would, say, or watch your aim, or you got your just desserts, or they'll make a something to bring people's attention to the ludicrousness of the whole hunting and animal cruelty issues. Definitely.
Thank you very much, caller. Thank you. I think that media life being what it is today, the Cheney story is spent. Oh, our clock's not running again, too. Oh, I better say my joke shortly. Our clock has stopped. I was wondering. I watch a clock in here, so. But I think the Cheney story is spent. And yesterday's news is more than yesterday's news these days. Last hour's news is gone when it's gone. And if any, no, I don't think people think one way or another about his having hunted or being a hunter. If you like him, you like him. If you don't like him, you don't like him. And of course, a lot of people don't. Although his ratings have gone down even more since that hunting incident, probably more for the callousness and the maybe that he's a hunter, maybe that he has to shoot quail, not Dan quail, but quail. Maybe that has some impact, come to think of it. I'd have to give that a little more thought. But let me say my last closing joke, and we hope to say on a Monday afternoon, 2 p.m. live, for you to call in questions. Thanks to the callers. And here's the joke, which I think is so funny. I hope you find it too. So Letterman is on with his monologue, and he says, George Bush is in India. And while he was in India, he goes for some yoga training. And the first thing that the instructor, they're sitting there cross-legged, the first thing the instructor says to do is empty your mind. And W says, way ahead of you. Thank you very much.